who's already in our studio just to try and explain to us what it means. But before we talk to him, let's have a look at this, where at least 300,000 students whose details are yet to be captured in the National Education Management Information System will miss out on government funding. Speaking after inspecting the effectiveness of the delivery of the competence-based curriculum at Ngong Township School, Education Principal Secretary Belio Kipsang explains that 30 billion shillings that the ministry had already disbursed will only cater for 2.6 million students whose details had been captured on NEMIS.
As at last week, we were having more than 3,000 schools who had not put in their data. And we thought if we pay and leaving out 3,000 schools, it would be more of a crisis. It was better to encourage all our teachers to make sure that the information is on NEMIS, and we wanted them to own the data that is on NEMIS. You know, we would have transferred the information that was in our systems into NEMIS, but you know, they would not own that. If you make a mistake in putting in the account number and send the monies to the wrong account, we would be in more problem as ministry than if the school owned the information by capturing it themselves. As of this morning, we were only having 500 schools which were still having challenges putting in their data. And we made a decision that we were going to pay the 2.6 million children whose data are already in the system. We have around 300,000 from around 500 schools who have not put in the data, but we have said today we are releasing monies to the schools which are ready.
Teachers now are reoriented. You have seen that even as children leave to go for lunches, I can see them doing so now. They are being told, they are being taught about things that they will even go and do at home. If you have a puppy, you should keep it clean from fleas. So it is student-centered, and it's a good thing for our children going forward, and our teachers are up to the task. I want to encourage them. We shall stand by them. We'll continue training them, even as we add more teachers for the transition as we get funds.
There you have it. You've heard what Education Principal Secretary Dr. Belio Kipsang has said, and also the CEO of the Teachers Service Commission, Nancy Macharia. And let's talk to education expert Latif Maina. And thank you so much for joining us here on KTN News Center. The Education Principal Secretary says only 300,000 students will not get funding from the government. Should the school principals be blamed for that or not? The reason as to why I'm asking you this, Mr. Wasai, it's because you've heard what the PS has said, that all public schools, boarding or day secondary schools, some of the principals are having difficulty in queuing details of, fitting the details of the students in the NEMIS system. So who should take the blame at the end of the day?
Thank you, Brenda, for having me. And I think from the onset, the NEMIS idea is a good thing because it introduces accountability. We are able to trace the level of investment for every learner in the education system. But what is happening is that the system is a little rigid in the way it is being implemented. The teachers were not incorporated in the development process. They made it a technology issue. The head teachers and administrators of schools were left on the side. So when it comes to implementation, the implementation is coming at the busiest point of the academic calendar for all the schools. Term 1 is a busy period for admission, and you notice that the ministry has changed the criteria for admission. So the head teachers were still grappling with that, but then they are told this admission is going to be through NEMIS, and if you do not submit details, you do not get the capitation grant. Now, this introduces another problem. Many of the schools have been forced to carry 200 to 300 learners more than their capacity. Now, this has therefore introduced overcrowding. Teachers are struggling to manage suppliers and manage the subordinate staff and support staff that they have to bring on board for purposes of supporting the learning process. So it is unfair that the ministry gives a directive to a head teacher who did not sit with the ministry on the table to request for more learners, but the learners were forced on them. But then you are told if the system does not recognize them, you do not get the capitation when you do not understand how to go about the process. It is evident in Kenya, Brenda, that many schools have problems accessing cellular network, let alone network for them to work on computers. So it's a challenge that we need to manage, but the ministry needs to have an internal fallback position. Any technological equipment or infrastructure can collapse. So they cannot tell us that there's only one highway. There needs to be an alternative for those who are lagging behind for purposes of bringing them up to speed.
So the internal fallback position, can it be, should it be that the ministry should actually release these funds based on the first-term capitation, then solve these other issues later?
That is an option, and I think it's a view that has been expressed by the chair of Secondary School Heads Association, who says the ministry knows the numbers we had in 2018. Let us get these resources as a minimum as we reconcile the figures. Now, also look at it this way. The Cabinet Secretary and the Principal Secretary of Education indicated that admissions that are happening outside NEMIS, the school has up to 3-4 weeks to rectify that situation. But as you are rectifying, what will these children be eating? Where will they be sleeping? Which desk will they be using? The head teachers need to be facilitated to procure these things and have the children in a comfortable environment for them to start learning.
And you know, Mr. Messiah, when the PS was talking, saying that 500 schools have not, released details of the students to the NEMIS system, 500 schools is not a small number because it has hundreds and thousands of students. Which takes me back to the question I asked you earlier. So who should be blamed? Because it looks like the system is failing, and those are the words of the PS. He said that some of these school principals are finding it hard to actually queue in details of the students.
The problem is with the ministry, because when you are introducing new infrastructure in a technological space, the idea is you need support, technical support. Head teachers and school administrators are not trained IT people. What we need to be having at a zone level, at a sub-county level, at a county level, is a Ministry of Education technocrat conversant with the system to support these teachers. Because for most of them, it is frustration. We are looking at this thing from the perspective of urban centers and people who have been socialized on technology. But in the rural areas, Brenda, we have teachers who are head teachers who have never touched a computer in their life. So we cannot expect that the same dexterity that is being expressed by teachers who are in Nairobi will be the same thing in Marakwet, it will be the same thing in Moyale, it will be the same thing in Rusinga Islands.
So what is the best way forward? Should the government go back to the old way in terms of releasing funds based on the details that the principals give them instead of using the NEMIS system? Because the NEMIS system is now proving to be a problem.
It's not really about going back to the old system, but it's about having a fallback position. And this is a function of planning. The idea is when you decide you are going to undertake an action, you need to ask yourself, so what question? If this does not work, where do we go to? And this is what the sector is missing in Kenya. Today we are talking about capitation grants for secondary schools. We are also having problems in the vocational centers. Where I come from in the larger western region, we have a vocational center in Butere with 600 children and 6 teachers. And 2 of the teachers is the principal and the deputy principal. In Mumias West, we have a vocational center that has no tutor, it only has the principal. So it is long-term planning. If you make a decision that we want something to happen, let us look at it from the beginning to the end. But we are too piecemeal for purposes of establishing systems in the sector, and that is why it appears that the leadership of the ministry is flip-flopping from one decision to the next.
Flip-flopping from one decision to the next, as you put it. So this means that this new system will also affect that 100% transition from primary to secondary schools, because even teachers are saying that they're overwhelmed. It's correct, the figures that you gave us, that schools that are supposed probably to take maybe 100 students are being given, between 200 to 300, numbers that even school principals cannot, handle in their own schools.
It is crazy, and it is the whole sector. There is a student I'm supporting at the university in Kenya who last month came to my house and told me, I'm proceeding to long holiday. Yesterday he calls me, the university has called him, and the university is saying, we are introducing a new semester, can you come back to school immediately? So there is lack of long-range planning in the sector, and I think it is time we sit up as stakeholders, look each other in the eye, and talk about the things that need to be done. What is happening, and this is my personal feeling, that the leadership of this country is not concerned with education, although we seem to be putting a lot of money into it.
But why would you want to say that the leadership of the nation is not concerned with education, yet it pumps in lots and lots of money?
Look at it this way, Brenda. The president's agenda for his legacy is Agenda 4. If you look at universal health care, the easiest way to obtain universal health care is through education, with public sanitation and awareness in school. But education is not in the healthcare. If you look at food security and agriculture, the easiest way to entrench that, to remain in sustainable over generations, is through education. Education is not there. For us to obtain affordable housing, we need children to go to school. We need to introduce innovation for us to have technology that will give us affordable housing. Education is not in housing. If you look at manufacturing, we need our graduates to be innovative and then build the 21st century technology for us to build factories. Education is not there. But on a more political note, look at it that when the Agenda 4 is coming onto the table, Dr. Matiang'i is in the Ministry of Education. He is moved from the Ministry of Education, that is receiving the largest share of the budgetary allocation, taken to Interior and National Government Coordination, where yesterday he becomes literally a super cabinet secretary. So it tells you the president's mind is elsewhere, not in education.
All right, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Messiah. So when you talk about 100%, transition from primary to secondary school, what should the government put in place? Releasing funds is one thing, and also having enough facilities for the students is another thing. So what is the way forward?
The way forward is, as I've said before, is long-range planning. We are going to get into a crisis in less than 3 years, and this can be taken to the bank, because the children who are in class 3 today are going to be finishing their primary education under the competency-based curriculum. Now, the curriculum talks of pathways. These children need to proceed to what is being called junior secondary. Where will they go? We need to be building infrastructure now. We need to be recategorizing our schools so that we are able to make provision for the pathways. But after 3 years, we are likely going to be in the same place, talking about the same thing and expecting a different result. So I think the Ministry of Education, the planning unit in the Ministry of Education, needs to work with Treasury for resources to be set aside, so that as we make a decision, we're implementing a new curriculum. Do we have the attendant infrastructure? Do we have teachers? As it is now, we have a shortage of over 70,000 teachers, and the Teacher Service Commission says they are going to employ 5,000 teachers to facilitate 100% transition. It is simply not sustainable.
So are we looking at a situation whereby head teachers, principals, high school principals, will be operating with a lot of debts because they don't have funds? The ministry has only released funds for students whose details have been captured. So what happens next?
It is a difficult position for the head teachers, and I do not envy it. And I think it was in the news recently the head teacher, St. Peter's in Mumias, had children, all over the place in dining halls and, stores and laboratories are being turned into spaces for learning. What this means is that the hands of the head teacher are tied when they step out to seek goods and services. So the goods they obtain are literally overpriced because they are taking them on credit and they will pay later. So the business owner will not give you a bag of maize at 2,500 to go feed your students when they know that you are not going to pay it in 6 months. They'll rather give it to you at 4,000 shillings so that when you pay, they'll be able to recoup the lost monies within the intervening period. So it is actually going to abet corruption. We are going to get more bills inflated. And as Kenyans, I want us to watch the auditor's report for the education sector that will come out after this crisis. So
are we looking at a situation whereby school principals are likely to, create a situation whereby they'll be requiring parents to pay for some nitty-gritties so that the schools can operate well?
Yeah, they are going to be creative, and in the process of being creative, that is where people are going to fiddle with numbers. And the ministry will have avoided this by proper planning, by engaging the teachers, because what is happening, many decisions are being made in Jogo House in Nairobi, and circulars are being sent left, right, and center. At the beginning of the year, a riot act is read, and these people are just supposed to interpret, and nobody takes care of the difficulties that they experience in managing the education and service provision in the rural areas and the far-flung points in Kenya.
Mr. Isaiah, I was about to bring this conversation to an end, but I really want to know from you, can the Teacher Service Commission, the teacher's employer, request the Ministry of Education to release these funds even before the students' details are released? Because these teachers, the head teachers are employed by the TSC. TSC also looks at the welfare of their members.
It is a tricky thing, and if you've been following the development in the sector, you will notice that TSC and the Ministry of Education only talk in tandem when the top guys in the two bodies are standing next to each other. Once they part, each one of them pursues another path. You notice that the Cabinet Secretary tried to introduce affirmative action that colleges need to admit student tutors who will become teachers with a lower grade for the pastoralist communities for purposes of showing up the numbers, because insecurity has over the last 3-4 years meant that non-local teachers left the area. TSC rejected that. Things went to court. The Attorney General gave an advisory, but they are not agreeing. And this is the function of Teacher Service Commission saying, we are an independent commission. Nobody can give us direction. But the ministry, on the other hand, says, but you are just a department in the Ministry of Education until the other day. So who makes you think you are bigger? But these ego games are hurting our children. These adults need to know that they have a responsibility for presiding over the education of our children in Kenya. They need to sit down and deliver on their mandate without letting children obtain education that is of low quality, because that is what is happening now. With the congestion, without lack of resources, the teachers are making do with what they have, and that is going to affect the health of many children, is going to kill dreams, and that is what we should not be doing in the 21st century, Brenda.
All right, thank you so much, Wesaya Maina, an education expert, talking to us about that crisis that school head teachers are facing, because so far 500 schools have not released details of about 300,000 students to the NEMIS system, making the students not to receive any education funding from the government. And the government maintains that the funds will only be released once the school principals release details of the students to the NEMIS system. Taking us to a second short commercial break here on KTN News Center, and we shall be right back at exactly 10 a.m. for the second hour. We still have a lot lined up for you.